it's weird because as a leftist and as like a materialist, the kind of correct way to go about this is to stop yourself from blaming individuals and their impulses and choices and decisions with regards to this as the cause of the larger problem. Because the real problem with coronavirus is that the state has absolutely fumbled the bag and failed to operate in a way that protects us, which is the thing it's supposed to be doing. Some would argue it's functioning exactly as it's designed to, because it's not actually about protecting us, right? That's the whole problem with our state. And here we go. Okay.
I love it. You got the pull down. You got the pull down green screen too.
I just got it, but it's like I gotta rejigger everything because it's not really set up.
I know it's like hard to nail it in the room exactly where it needs to go. Yeah. But awesome. Well, Jake, really happy you were able to come by. I thank you very much. I really appreciate it. By the way, what you're seeing on your end is just like what my stream is seeing, and you're relatively familiar with Twitch, right? Yeah. Totally. So like y'all don't stream on Twitch, do you?
We have a Twitch and like we do stuff sometimes with it, but we don't really have like a regular Twitch thing going. It's I don't know, it's work in progress.
Okay.
We dip our toes in.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe that's something we could talk about in the future, because I got some ideas. But today's more about like, I'm just fucking knee deep in this Joe Rogan thing, the Joe Rogan and Spotify, and then like this Chappelle shit popped off too, and I'm just super drawn to that as well. And I guess today's an opportunity for us to talk about that. I want to talk about you a little bit, help my audience get to know you a little bit. So Jake Flores, aka Feral Jokes, which I've always loved. Was it an ambigram? What do they call that?
Anagram.
Yeah, it's an ambigram of feral jokes, ambigram of your name. A comedian, host of the brilliant Pod Damn America with Alex Patak and Anders Lee. You're a checkmark guy on Twitter, and I don't know if it's cool to say like an Eve 6 orbiter. Not in a bad way. I don't mean that in a bad way.
I'm part of the Eve 6 expanded universe.
Yes, the Eve 6 expanded universe. You've gone on tour with Eve 6, and if I'm not mistaken, you're going to go on tour again. Is that right?
Well, technically, this is actually the first time, because we had booked a tour last year that coronavirus kind of put the kibosh on, and then we were going to be on the same festival, this thing called Fest in Gainesville. It's like a punk festival, which I ended up making it to, but they didn't because one of them got COVID. So this is actually going to be the first time we've actually worked together, but we are friends on the internet. That's for sure.
Max is a cool guy. We've had Max on Kenzo's show, so like friend of the show as well. Extreme Wealth Tour. You didn't pick the name, did you?
No.
You didn't get to workship that with him. So you're going on tour. Sorry.
He had asked me to throw him some ideas for stuff like that, and I think he ended up ultimately picking that, and then also that picture is a meme that our friend Sydney Leathers made about Eve 6. But that being said, I think Extreme Wealth is very funny, and it's like totally my sense of humor.
Okay, yeah. So you're you'll be opening. You're gonna do comedy, and then We Are the Union, some other band, and then Eve 6 pops up. That's the night.
Yeah. We Are the Union's a great ska band, which some people might refer to that as an oxymoron, but I think ska is experiencing a revival. We can all agree.
Is it?
But I think what I'm doing is I'm doing 2 sets. Musicians always do this thing where they want you, if they have a comic, they want you to like host the night.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm introducing both of them.
Okay. And you got a full tour schedule here. Looks like a couple months, starting in Austin, ending in Illinois. I'll have to come. I was talking to my partner. We'll have to come see you at the Bottom Lounge when you visit Chicago.
There's actually a couple more dates because there's 2 sets of promo flyers that went out. That one is the one We Are the Union is advertising because like they aren't on all of the dates. Right. So if you're in Tucson or Southern California, there's a couple other, if you're curious about this, you can find it. It's on my Twitter and Eve6's Twitter and everyone's. We're playing with another band called Field Medic. You might have heard of.
Field Medic? No. Is it like a new band?
They're, if you're a music dork, you might be into them.
I feel like I stopped listening to new bands around Eve6. Like that was a. You into new music a lot?
I try, but there's just this weird thing that happens after age 30 where you somehow are just physically incapable of even knowing how to do that anymore.
Yeah, it's like what are the mechanisms? Like how does one do that?
I don't know.
Where do I go?
It used to come so naturally to me, and
now
there's just all this stuff I have to do all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, so Jake, I figured I'd let you just go ahead and do a set of comedy. Go for it. I'm totally kidding. I'm not expecting. That totally.
Rude. For a second, I was like, "You."
That son of a.
But also, I couldn't do it because I am, a professional.
I like how I come off just stupid enough, so you're like, "Is he serious?"
No, I'm prepared for that at all times. That's part of the stand-up grift. Is you're a carny, man. You live by the seat of your pants, and comics will go to shows, and often someone doesn't show up who's supposed to go on. So that's a skill everyone has to have, is be able to drop of a hat, go rattle off 10 minutes. You have nightmares about it because it's stressful, but it's it's part of it.
I still have performance nightmares from when I did choir stuff in college. I still have panic nightmares about that. Okay, so Pod Damn America, it's a riff on Pod Save America. That podcast with those guys. Have you ever heard from any of them? John Favreau, John Lovett, Dan Pfeiffer, Tommy Vitor. You ever heard from those guys?
Lately, no, but I used to get into it with them on Twitter and stuff. They were, they're very active they were. I think the algorithm might have sorted us away from each other to stop me from yelling at them or something. Or they blocked me. But yeah, stand-up world. I mean, they hire a lot of comics to do ostensibly, I think, what they're claiming that something that they do over there is comedy. And it's weird because there's even a few people that I'd say are rather funny, which to me is infuriating because, you see the role of art being exploited for political purposes, which is nothing new, but it's man, it's a bummer to watch people who are, funny get a job like that and not really be able to turn it down and end up shilling for, the much more insidious side of the capitalist machine, the thing that kind of insists that it isn't all of the stuff, So I mean, I have friends who are friends with me and who work with them. And when we talk about it, they just laugh because they're like, man, they would hate if they knew we were hanging out, because I have a show that is ostensibly, the title at least is a spoof on them. But honestly, I make a lot of projects. Okay.
Yeah.
I started a million podcasts, and the way I work creatively is, when something starts bearing fruit, then I concentrate on it. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to do this now. So PDA was something I started and was let's see if I can make a thing where I get to make a podcast out of learning about left stuff and doing, theory and book groups and stuff like that. And, spreading the good word and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it took off, but because it took off and it was one of a million things, I sometimes, and this is just a creative, neurotic, sort of I think everyone has this or whatever with their own thing. But the name at this point in the year 2022, I'm like, nobody knows what the fuck. Can I curse on here? Nobody. This is Twitch, right? There's certain words I can't say.
Fuck yeah.
Okay. But nobody knows what the fuck Pod Save America is anymore. They were very much a product of the 2016 election cycle. Mm-hmm. So I find myself having to explain the title a lot because they're not a thing anymore. What are they doing, stuff with Beto O'Rourke or whatever? But the other thing that I think is a much better reference that is embedded in the title of Pod Damn America is Goddamn America.
Goddamn America.
The Reverend Wright, Obama's old pastor, gave a really cool sermon that we use as our theme music, where he said,
right.
"Goddamn."
And that was such a big fucking deal. Reminds me that Hassan said that on Twitch that the U.S. deserved 9/11. You know what I mean? It's that kind of shit. It's that kind of shit. All right. Well, I appreciate you telling me about the name a little bit more there, Jake. And those guys. Yo, I just got to ask real quick on one of your places. It says that like the podcast is a gothic socialist comedy podcast. Can you just real quick? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's just like a joke. So basically what happened is in the beginning of the show, because the name is Pod Damn America, I did this thing that you do when a podcast takes off where you ask your audience, hey, what do you guys want to be called? Because comics are, always referencing their following in this way that's a joke, but like Marin used to go, what's up, what the fuckers, when he would start this podcast. And and I was thinking about that, and so I did a Twitter poll, and I was like, here's a bunch of stuff that's been thrown at us. Somebody was like, honestly, I liked this one a little bit better. Somebody was like, we should be called Dammers, which just sounds like a turn of the century, like Quakers type thing or whatever. And I was like, that's pretty funny. But one of the ones that I put up was The Damned, which is a cool band if you're into punk, but also is just very intense. Mm-hmm. And everyone picked that one. Everyone listens to the show was like The Damned. And so I was joking about it on the show, and I was like, you guys are intense. Like, you guys are a bunch of goths, right? And so then I was just riffing on that. And so I would intro the show and go, welcome to Pod Damn America, the Gothic Socialist Podcast. And it just became the way that we like introed the show. And but then like as a bit, it kind of turned into a thing that I explored a little bit, because I mean, I'm into music. Like, I know I told you, I'm old and I suck at it, but I still try. And when I was younger, I was better at it. But I enjoy goth culture quite a bit. I mean, look at me, I'm wearing all black and shit. You can tell what's going on, right? Yeah. And so some of the stuff that we get into on the show, because it's such a broad concept and it has such a wide scope. And I did that on purpose. I'm a guy with a lot of thoughts. I want to be able to have I like having a podcast where 1 week we can explore some esoteric history thing. The next week we can read history. The next week we can talk about what's going on in the news right now. And then if something strikes me about, a story about a band or something that I think on some level relates to culture and politics in a way, that I can go do some research or interview a person or whatever. So I talk about music and stuff like that sometimes. And because honestly, just off of that riff, and then realizing like, talking about goth shit so much because of the joke, I've done some stuff on the show where I was like, let's talk about, the 80s and stuff. Let's talk about music, and interviewed people who talked about goth culture and how it, is this underlying thing that in so many ways you can connect back to politics and society and stuff like that. I'm a big everything is connected person. I'm very into the rhizome and everything. So like it's weird that it turned into that. But I just kind of rolled with it. Also, we're friends with the Antifada, right. This other podcast. And Jamie on the Antifada, I was talking about this with her, and she's also a big music person, is also into goth stuff. So we did a live show where like that was the theme and stuff like that. But it's a creative riff, I guess, is what's going on. And also kind of a troll, because nobody knows what it means, and that's funny to me.
I had to ask. That's it. That's fun. I love how bits like that, they just sort of evolve. I have like I don't want to call it comedic, but I would call it silly. A silly little stream over here. We try to keep it light. There's lots of little bits, we got to like keep ourselves interested. Yeah. All right. So, hey, Jake, do you want to dig into like talking about some of that comedian stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's dig in.
It's the name of the game right now,
Right. So we got Joe Rogan. That's been popping off. I feel like there's just so much to talk about that. And then, of course, in the last day or so, we've got the Dave Chappelle housing discourse. Where do you want to start? or something
um,
else. Yeah.
I think that the Earth revolves around Joe Rogan right now. It's probably the place to start and jump off and get to everywhere else.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah.
the Rogan thing is really funny because there's like 10 overlaying issues happening at the same time. You know, one of them is if you're just really into the vaccination culture war, you might be furious about the misinformation aspect of it or whatever. And it is like annoying, but I mean, ultimately, um, as a as a leftist and as like a materialist, you know, the kind of correct way to go about this is to stop yourself from blaming individuals and their impulses and choices and decisions with regards to this as the cause of the larger problem. Because what's the real problem with coronavirus is that the state has absolutely fumbled the bag and failed to operate in a way that, you know, protects us, which is the thing it's supposed to be doing. Some would argue it's functioning exactly as it's designed to, because it's not actually about protecting us, right? That's the whole problem with our state. And, you know, getting really mad about, you know, just dumbasses that don't know any better that get sucked into conspiratorial theories and stuff like that is kind of a waste of time. However, you know, we live in unprecedented times, and the Joe Rogan's podcast is something that the world has never really seen before. So you can read all these old heady philosophers and go, well, you know, Marx said this, and, you know, yada yada yada. It's like, well, Marx didn't have a podcast that 8 whatever million billion whatever people listen to,
Yeah.
that functions as a form of propaganda on accident, you know, and has these byproducts to it. So like, that is weird. I wish that he wouldn't be like this, and it's bizarre to me because like I've, you know, this is a human I've like seen in real life, and I can play phone tag and get his phone number and stuff. So to me, it's very bizarre. Like, you know, that some guy in my circle of people who none of us should be this important, you know, is operating with such gravity or whatever, right? You know, and then there's the free speech stuff, which is extra stupid in my opinion. Like, it's a dumb American concept. Everyone thinks that they know what this term free speech means. Nobody can really define it in a way that is consistent at all. Yeah. I'm a big, you know, I tend to lean on the side of free speech is like when censorship is when the government stops you from doing something. Mm-hmm. You can't really define someone operating in a way within the private market that you just don't like as censorship, because like that's their free speech. Like, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And also, I had like the government try to censor me. I'm one of a few comedians that's happened to. Years ago, ICE came to my house, Homeland Security, technically, because I made a joke about how you should be able to kill them. Which I'm not going to go into great detail. I don't want to get us kicked off of here, but I made a joke about how that should happen, and they came to my house, and I had experienced the government stepping in, and ultimately, that joke got taken down off the internet, but I've told it a million times on stage. I talk about it all the time. I didn't really get censored by the government even, but I came close, and so I always look at people like this who are talking about, like, oh, censorship is, oh, they fired that guy from SNL, oh, Neil Young is censoring Joe Rogan. I'm like, you guys don't even know what censorship is. The government hasn't been involved in this at all. It's stupid, right? On the other hand, there is a theory of free speech that I think is more apt, which a writer named P.E. Moskowitz wrote a great book about, called The Case Against Free Speech, which is more that, you know, if you want to really talk about what it means, free speech has never really been defined, and there's a way of looking at it that's more like, we don't have free speech in America because we don't have like resources, and we're not able to materially like express ourselves in so many ways. I'm kind of more into this. Is a great book. I think everyone should read it because it fleshes this out in a lot of ways and makes you realize that, we are not actually as free as we like to think we are just because you can say whatever you want. Well, you don't have any power, right? So that's another aspect of it. And then the third one is the recording industry, because this turned into a thing where a bunch of musicians seized the moment and took advantage of the fact that there is this culture war thing, this backlash against Spotify, and used it to call attention to the fact that their business practices are extremely predatory. And I had Steve Albini on PDA a few days ago to talk about it. And I'm going to plug my own show here, mostly because he is brilliant and was extremely cogent, was able to break down things that people do not understand about the recording industry, which is that often people will start talking about this and go, well, you signed a contract, so, that you're doing business with Spotify. And it's like, it doesn't even work like that. Like, the people that are angry at the fact that they're being exploited by Spotify, the musicians are this is happening because of contracts they signed like in the 90s before Spotify existed. A lot of crazy stuff's happening. And then the fourth intersection of this is the role of comedians, which I think is the funniest thing, because a few days ago, in response to all this, after Joe Rogan was then sort of put back into the spotlight because people went through all the episodes of his podcast somehow, and
that's great.
And made a compilation of all the times he's like said the N-word and stuff, and also platformed like white supremacists and stuff like that. That now there's a sort of backlash against that, and there's a conversation around whether that's the reason that he should be, this, that, or the other, which caused people in the comedy world to chime in. And the funniest thing that happened was that this comic named Whitney Cummings, who's a store comic, comedy stores where Joe Rogan used to operate before he moved to Austin. She said that the job of a comedian is to be like brave and question authority and to guide us through a spooky mental haunted house. These are her words. Wow. Spooky mental haunted house, justifying the fact that the white comedians sometimes say the N-word is what she was saying. She's saying what you're doing when you say the N-word is, and I think what she was trying to say is that when you're a comedian and you might transgress in such ways, cross these lines, sometimes a beautiful thing happens in comedy, which is that this sort of, in a way, can take a thing that's a huge negative and sort of take the piss out of it and offer you, the comedian, or you, the person laughing, a sense of dominion over what was previously a painful experience. And that is true. Lenny Bruce talked about this. Every great comedian ever has talked about this. It's definitely possible, and it's why comedians love comedy. But it doesn't mean that's what you're doing every time you say the N-word. It also doesn't mean that that's what's happening in the audience's head just because you think you're doing that every single time. The problem is comedians think that intention is 100% of the thing that's happening when you tell a joke, and it's not. The whole point is the way people are going to take in what you're saying, which is why you have to adjust to the audience and stuff. So this caused a lot of discourse on Twitter, and it started trend. People were making fun of this so much it started trending, which is really fun. That's kind of because I'm a comic and it's funny to me, and I also like, if people should listen to me about anything, it's probably that. So like, that's where my brain's been at the last couple of days. I've been thinking about that tweet and that discourse a lot.
I just tangentially remember talking about this in chat. Someone mentioned Whitney Cummings, and I guess this is what they were talking about. Yeah. She felt the full force of Twitter, I think, that day. I mean, it's not a feeling. It happens to me all the time. But main character.
I feel for her on some level, because honestly, she's part of the Comedy Store, which is like its own kind of I would argue kind of resembles an MLM, like this aspect of comedy.
Oh,
It's a little bit of a cult. You
yeah.
have to
You got to buy in.
Work for free and stuff to get in, and there's all these levels and stuff.
Okay.
And like, it's stupid. People should just make art and comedy and not do this sort of stuff. But you know, we live in capitalism, right? So the store culture is they suck. Like they're all free speech dorks.
Ew.
They all believe this sort of stuff that she expressed. I almost feel kind of bad for her because like she's just the one that said it and then got owned for it. But all of these people believe this stuff and would word it as poorly as she did.
Mm-hmm.
And she's actually usually not as brainwashed as the rest of them. Like I'm aware of her and stuff, and I've watched like documentaries about the Comedy Store and stuff. Mm-hmm. And she often doesn't like go 100% with the mob over there on this stuff. Like she often dissents a little bit. Like she won't work with certain comedians who are abusive, which I commend very much because that's actually brave in my opinion as a comic. And every once in a while she doesn't really buy into the cancel culture stuff that they're all obsessed with, but she very much embodied like the culture, the ideas right now that are extremely reactionary that have found a home in the stand-up comedy world in what she was saying, because that's what they all think they're doing when they make a lot of money off of being a white person and saying the N-word.
All right. Before I forget, Jake, I do want to mention, and I feel is remiss the correct word for not mentioning, you're also on Why You Mad podcast with friend Louisa D's Nuts. Louisa Diaz there on Twitter. That's a great podcast too. I just had to make sure that I didn't forget to mention that. But
thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, hold on. I went to the wrong scene. Boop. Okay. So Jake, yeah, I did listen to your Steve Albini episode. I don't think I caught the whole thing. The weird thing about what is it, SoundCloud? It doesn't let you listen fast. So I like to listen to things a little. I got places to be. I
got you.
But listened in. He dropped the word paradigm.
Absolutely.
In a sentence like it was nothing. That's always incredible to me. I'm always like, nice.
At one point, Anders just pulled out some obscure like intellectual property legislation from the 90s, because Anders, if you listen to my show, is a weirdo and is obsessed with certain political things. And he just pulled out some random act and he asked Steve Albini about it. And he had an answer off the dome that was like 10 minutes long. And it was insane, dude. That guy is, I'm sure it's specifically because he's completely into this one topic in such ways. But when you interview people, sometimes you probably can relate. I mean, somebody who streams and stuff like that, some people you got to pull information out of. As soon as I started talking to him, I was like, this is one of those guys who I should say one thing and then listen to him talk for an hour, because it was like, I felt very much like an like something where I was like, classes in session, like, you're getting this for free. This is an opportune moment. Everyone should listen to that dude talk and like read the stuff that he writes and stuff, because it's a wealth of information and perspective that like most people are lacking.
Steve Albini. That's a glowing Steve Albini review right there.
I'm a big fan. I'm also a big fan.
I thought I saw like him and Max Collins, Eve 6 guy, going back and forth. Were they arguing about something a couple weeks ago? Am I making that up?
So Max's thing, who by the way, his name's not Max. His name is the guy from Eve 6.
Right. Sorry.
That's one of his bits or whatever. He's a really funny guy, man.
He is.
I have never met him in real life, and we're going on tour, and it's because he experiences the internet in a certain way that I think I do too, and he's aware that he is a one-hit wonder, and that what that is, and sort of, I think at some point seems to have clearly like had some kind of epiphany where he decided not, maybe I'm reading too much into here, but like decided to understand his role as an artist in a way that is more like self-aware and like less condescending than artists tend to be or whatever. And he clearly has put a lot of thought into the political economy and stuff like that underlies something like being an artist in the modern world, in capitalism, in stuff like the recording industry. And he's also very funny about it, and I think he gets the sense of humor at Twitter. So what he does a lot of the time is he starts fake beefs with people. So he'll start tweeting at a celebrity or whatever, and then they'll jokingly start insulting each other, to the extent he was doing it with Patton Oswalt, who is also a great comic, somebody I've worked with. Plug there. I don't know, self bragging.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Fuck yeah.
Plug.
Brag.
But somebody I enjoy a lot. And so him and Patton were going back and forth, and a comic friend of mine, this is so funny because this is what's supposed to happen, and this is what satire and what we refer to now as trolling is going for. A friend of mine who's a comic got really mad at him and was like, "How dare you insult Patton Oswalt? He's the great comedian." Had no idea they were totally joking. They were both in on it or whatever. And so if you've seen him beefing, quote unquote, with Albini, it's the same bit. Like they just started doing it together. But then I think they also turned that into momentum to then use to raise awareness about this thing that artists are doing right now, where they're sending a message to Spotify by pulling their music and ending their subscriptions and stuff like that. So like kind of like the thing I was describing with the goth thing weaving in and out of being different concepts. That's kind of what's going on with him and like the internet. Like he is he's doing bits and stuff, and then is able to like promote his band, which is self-interest, sure, but also like do this stuff with Spotify and raise awareness about causes that are anti-capitalist and stuff that benefits us, because I know he's a big podcast head and he's into left stuff. And I don't know, that's I think part of the landscape we're living in right now. Like I am not a self-important person. I don't think like I'm doing God's work or whatever by going on podcasts and stuff like that, but I also don't I don't think we should not be doing this stuff. Like I do think that by using our skills as broadcasters and speakers and stuff like that, something is happening that is unprecedented and wasn't a thing in the 1800s and stuff like that, where we're able to spread ideas in a way that I don't know. I'm not too optimistic about the future of the movement, but it does feel pretty good to be able to get everyone's attention with jokes like he's doing, and then parlay that into something social.
I'm starting to think maybe we should get Eve 6 guy a podcast. Yeah, maybe he'll get a PC and everything.
Yeah, right, because he does
he's on his phone.
On phones. It's crazy.
He doesn't have a PC.
I bet he would do a podcast.
I bet we can get him into that. I just thought of that, and I'm literally pitching that to you live. But that's just an idea. Yo, so okay, so we're brought to Eve 6 here. In the landscape of the whole conversation with Rogan and Spotify, Eve 6 guy was the first. Max, it feels so funny. Eve 6 guy was the first to sort of like tie in for me. Like, Dan, no, it's not just about COVID. And for me, it is about COVID disinformation, because in the age of COVID, I believe COVID kills, right? So like that's like where I'm coming from. But yes, there's obviously that economic aspect. He was sort of the first to bring that to my mind, and then I feel like India Ari just took what Eve 6 put on the tee and just fucking knocked it out of the park. You saw India Ari steak?
I did not. What
Really
happened?
good. Well, the only way I could pull up the video is through an anti-Semitic black lady, so I'm not going to play that for you. But she effectively said, you know, if you understand the history of music, it's built off the labor of black and brown artists. Right? And that's exactly the case still on Spotify today. The majority of music on Spotify is black and brown music. She had this fucking-tastic quote, and let me find it really quickly for you. She says, it took a Neil Young to open the door for someone like me, but I walked through because I've been standing at this door for a long time. And I was just like, damn.
Damn, it's tight.
Right? So
Yeah.
she's like, take me off. You know, what if we all leave? Then we can go from a conversation to a negotiation. And I love that. I like that a lot.
It's chilling. It's a really good point too, because something that Albini talked about a lot. He's got my brain focused a certain way now because he framed things in a way that I think is I don't know, just very interesting, and it's true, and it's not intuitive, which is when you're talking about art, this like the lens, the framework of even talking about it as a commodity doesn't really work, because intellectual property is like kind of a bullshit concept that is not meant to be functioning the way it does. And so, like, you know, you talk about music being built on the backs of black and brown people in so many ways. Yeah, you can argue like, oh, you know, so and so wrote this song and then it got sold by some record label owner who exploited that person, and that's true. But also on another level, I mean, black people invented the music that rock and roll, you know, like still is. When you use a chord progression or something in a song, you didn't invent that. You know, art is built on the shoulders of everyone that came before it. It's a collaborative thing no matter what you're doing. So this very individualized way that we think about ourselves as entrepreneurs that sell things that we make, it's bullshit. As a joke even is the same way. I mean, you know, if you could see inside of the mind of a comedian when they're writing a dick joke, it's hilarious because it's a dick joke, but it's also a thing that we have like a Terminator screen going on where I'm like, okay, here's the setup. I'm going to connect it this way. Here's the tag and stuff. All these fundamentals were not invented by me, the guy writing the joke. They come from a long tradition of this thing that happens outside of capitalism that, you know, a lot of it's conversational, but a lot of it's within the framework, the history of stand-up and stuff too. So like, it's absurd to take it, to not like understand that it's no matter who the artist is who's performing right now, they're performing alongside all of the history of the thing. And if the history of it is all black and brown people, you know, it's a fucked up situation to look at one person making all the money off of it. Everything should make you a socialist. If you go down to the bottom of any rabbit hole, like, you're going to get back to this, you know?
Everything should make you a socialist. Do you hear that, chat? Listen up when Daddy Jake speaks, and you're going by Daddy now. I don't know what's happening here.
I'm the guy opening for Eve 6 or Daddy Jake. Either of those are fine.
The guy opening for the guy in Eve 6. Awesome. Yeah. The Eve 6 guy. All right. Okay, Jake, can you do me a favor? Like, let me see. And I think I already hit you with this in the DM. This is like my overall take, and I just want to see if it sinks or floats. And I think maybe you've spoken to a few of these points, so feel free to knock them down if I'm saying dumb shit or whatever. I'm not like looking for a debate. I'm just seeing whether or not this makes sense to other people. So like my like Rogan take is just like me looking at comedy as like an outsider. I'm not a comedian. But like for me, it's like you were touching on it before, sort of like pushing boundaries. You know, comedy seems to be like, you know, to an extent, some people are definitely, this is like their thing. They love to make people laugh about things that they're sort of not supposed to laugh about. Some people do that in better ways than others. And I think some people are more intentional than others. And of course, you could see how good and how bad people are at it when you see like an amateur up sort of like attempting it and not doing quite well, right? So like my main thing is like it just seems like Joe Rogan's just doing that thing. That's like what comedians do, but he's like in the podcast world and he's doing that same thing but with like ideas and like conversations that you're sort of quote unquote not supposed to talk about. And he's like literally in the best position to do so. He's like the biggest podcaster. He's looked up to for doing it. This is sort of his philosophy coming into it. He profits from it directly. If he pushes Spotify too hard, they might even cut his contract and, you know, he gets free money. I don't know. Is this like intentional, the fucking thing that he's doing when, and I don't know if you know this, Jake. And just to go back to sort of the censorship angle, when he got signed to Spotify, Spotify's like, no, we don't want some of these episodes. We won't let them in. So like he got censored, if that's how you want to define it, right? On the way in. And he literally said, quote unquote, I don't care. He was, yeah, it was $100 million. But at that point, like my thing is like, I think it's like a game to him at this point because he's like, he wanted Spotify to be hands off at that point. And there's a quote of him saying, our first test is going to be when Alex Jones joins us on the show. Alex Jones is already banned on Spotify. By the way, where are the free speech warriors then? All of a sudden it becomes a free speech thing, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like Rogan's got no legs to stand on if he ever wants to make that argument. That's why he makes his fucking, you know, followers, you know, on the internet make that argument for him. But like, I thought that was an interesting thing. Not a lot of people know that he allowed himself to get censored on the way in. But he's like, at that point, he's like, well, fine. When it comes to Alex Jones, that's going to be the test. I think it's like a game to him, man. He's just pushing the boundaries. And it's just like, for me, it's like a functioning theory. I could be convinced and be disabused of this, but like, it just seems like he's cynically playing little power games. What do you think?
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that about him being censored on the way in, but that's, of course, everything's like this, you know? I think that you're probably correct in that he is operating on a consistent philosophy of pushing boundaries in that way, because the reason that so many comedians get duped into platforming right-wing, you know, intellectual dark web dickheads and bell curve people and stuff like that, and you know, David Duke and so on and so forth, is that there is a consistent philosophy that will cause you to come to the conclusion that a lot of I am open. Yeah, Jared from Scotchy Network is in We Are the Union, or plays with them.
They're so cool. Sorry.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But what I think that's really well put, because a white guy saying the N-word on stage as a joke and also booking people who are radioactive, it's the same principle, which is, well, everyone else is afraid to do this, and the fact that people are afraid to do it is what's causing it to have so much power, and so on and so forth, right? That's the argument. I don't really think it's true, but that's something you hear from comics all the time. And also, you know, the path of entrepreneurship or whatever also leads people into comics into why are we all talk show hosts? It doesn't make any sense. There's no money in comedy. We all have podcasts and streaming and stuff like that. So there's this explanation that you'll get from comics when they book someone who is too far, who's considered outside of a boundary that normal shows, you know, would operate in, which is that they think by doing so, they're going to treat a topic with a level of perspective that most people are like too afraid to engage with, and learn something from it, and maybe better understand it, and you know, be able to push progress in a way that like everybody else hasn't done. And it's so romantic. Like, I get why young dumb comics get into this sort of stuff and think that that's really what's happening there, but there's so many dynamic ways and like views around this and like things that happen as a result of this that just consistently like clearly don't play out in that way. And I think it's a lie you tell yourself when you're making money off of something, because the truth, which is that you just did it because you made money off of it, is way less romantic. And I think that the thing about like guys like Rogan is that he's operating with an extreme level of passivity, in my opinion. He's a good interviewer, you know, because he's he's one of those guys who like everything he believes is whatever the last person he talked to told him, you know. He's a blank slate every day of his life. He's extremely objective in that sense. Anyone that goes into that room with him, he'll go like, oh yeah, wow, like everything you're saying. And on some level, if you're somebody who believes in objective journalism, that's a value. I personally don't. I'm a Hunter Thompson guy. I don't think you could be objective when it comes to Nixon, you know?
Let's go Gonzo.
Yeah. But if that's a value that, you know, that makes sense to you, you can look at him and go, well, he is just talking to a lot of people. But here's the thing. If Joe Rogan was like going around and going out of his own personal bubble of comfort and talking to a lot of people with a lot of different points of view, there might be some value to his podcast. You know, the fact that it pushes so much of this intellectual dark web stuff and so much of this race science and so much of this stupid reactionary stuff, so much of this white centric, stupid, dumb frat guy sort of culture and stuff like that might be outweighed by him talking to everyone else in society. But by nature of who he is and where he stands and things that, you know, serve his interests without him even knowing it, the only people that he talks to are these people. So he's a guy who probably thinks to himself, well, I talk to everybody I meet. And then it's like, yeah, but who do you meet, dude? Like, yeah. Who is hanging out in the circles that Joe Rogan hangs out in? Yeah. You know, you're not going to naturally meet a black person probably ever, you know, unless it's like a fucking famous comedian or whatever.
Oh, Zuby.
Or a poor person or a socialist or, you know, whatever. Yeah. So this is confusing nature of it where like, I think he's a hilarious figure because I think he wakes up every day and he's just like, you know, a guy, like he's just chilling. Yeah. He's intentions are probably pure. But when you have something that you're wielding that has that much of an effect on the entire planet, like at all times, it doesn't matter that your intentions are pure. And that is a direct parallel to the thing about saying slurs on stage, which is that it doesn't matter that your intentions were to do this thing that engages with someone's trauma in this one specific way, because you don't have control over the fact that not every single person in the room is in a place where it's going to work, which is why, and I'm a fucking edgelord, baby. Like, I love fucked up jokes. I've said all the slurs. Like, I'm not denying any of this stuff. I'm just, like, my thing with regards to all of the bad words and stuff and all the messed up things that you could say that could mess up someone's head and hurt them while you're doing stand-up is you don't have to not do those things, but you can't operate in this way where you demand that it works 100% of the time and that no one ever has a bad reaction. Right. Why would it work that way? The whole point of what you're doing is to transgress. It is to cross a line that you understand is there, right? So, like, for me, you either got to just gamble and take the licks where they happen and fail sometimes and know that you're going to ruin someone's night in the audience, or, in my opinion, become a pornographer, become somebody who knows what they're selling. And it's like, if you want to watch my messed up comedy show where I say the N-word, know that that's what you're getting into when you come into the show. You know, it's the late night show on a Friday. Know that it's the fucked up show. That way, if we get that out of the way and everyone's like, okay, I signed my consent form mentally or whatever before we go in, then it's like, you know, no harm, no foul if you do actually kind of, you just leave if you're in the audience and you're like, Okay, it's on me to leave now, right?
Yeah.
Changes the functions of the situation. But comedians don't act that way. They like, especially when you start becoming famous and you start, getting into the entrepreneur thing or whatever. This culture war that all these guys are mired in is essentially like this thing where they're acting like they're offended that anyone would have a problem with these things that they're doing that are purposely transgressive. Just bizarre. And the idea that a comedian is just supposed to kill like 100% of the time. It's the audience is in capitalism. This thing that's referred to as cancel culture, where people like yell at a comedian and go, "I hate that the fact that you made a transphobic comedy special or whatever." It's referred to as like a mob or like a phenomenon. That's the audience. I mean, if you make art on a global scale like that, and you don't like the feedback you got, that's the same thing as someone in the audience going, "Boo, you suck," which is the thing you as a performer in theory are oriented around and in theory are trying to, make not happen or whatever. So like with him, I mean, he wants to be a baby, he just wants to be a passive baby and like do all this stuff. And, or at least his fans do, honestly, Rogan, though, he doesn't complain that much about this stuff. Whenever he does get bothered into doing like an apology, it seems like somebody interrupted him while he was playing video games or something, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever, I'll do this. Yeah, my bad." It's the people that are frothing at the mouth over this are his fans and his other comics that are lower on the rung, that are kind of in the temporarily embarrassed millionaire mindset or whatever, who are like, "This is important to me," That's who I think is like projecting all this stuff onto him. I don't know.
And then this weird thing happens where like he's just so thirsty to say the N-word, right? And if he doesn't get to say it, or if he gets backlash, he's the victim. Shut up, Joe Rogan. I'm just so tired of this shit. All right, so that's hour one. Hour two, we're gonna talk about Dave Chappelle. Hour three, I got to talk about Louis C.K., Aziz. Hour four, Bill Cosby. We got you all day. No, seriously, I would love to keep chit-chatting with you, Jake, but it's been an hour. I feel like I got to let you go. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a lot of good times for me. I would love to do it again.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. I mean, like awesome. I said, this is the only thing I could potentially call the area of my expertise. So this is the thing that I can do the Albini thing about. I just open up my head and unscrew it and talk about it all day, because this is what I think about all day. Just don't ask me to come back here and talk about something esoteric, right. Like, trains or something I don't understand.
I mean, I'm into trains, but I don't know much about them. Dude, Jake, this is absolutely a lot of fun. I'm just going to say this. I don't say this to a lot of people, but the door is open. I would love to be joined by you again, just about any time. If you ever got like something you want to chit chat about, you want to use this as a space to use as a sounding board or whatever, dude, like I really appreciate you and of course, thank you for being with me today. Thanks for hanging out. This really means a lot. Thanks so much, dude.
Thanks for letting me go off, man.
Fuck yeah. That was my pleasure. So before we go, I'm going to give you the big shout out. Folks, you could find Jake Flores on the Pod Damn America podcast, and as well on the Why You Mad. Is that right? Did I get that one right? Why You Mad podcast? Why You Mad with Luisa Diaz. All right. Jake's going to be on tour. With Eve 6 guy and the rest of Eve 6. I mean, I'm assuming it's a full band, right? It's not just Max.
Yeah.
I mean, Eve 6
guy. It's the band that the guy from Eve 6 is in.
We'll figure that out, whatever they're called. Here's some of the dates, and I think some more of the dates are going to be released as we go. Give Jake a follow at Feral Jokes. All right, what did I miss? Did I leave anything out? Just want to make sure you get the full big shout out.
If you live in New York, I have a live show at the Gutter, which is a punk bar. It's also a bowling alley in Williamsburg. It's on next Tuesday, the 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. All my shows are in my pinned tweet. So check that out. I do online stuff sometimes. I do touring outside of this tour. That's it.
And that was a big hint for those of you who just realized it was Valentine's Day in 4 days as well. Thanks for that reminder. I appreciate it. All right, Jake. I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate you. Peace. Have a good one. Thanks so much. See you next time. Okay, bud.
Thanks, man.
See you around. All right. Thanks. That's that.